Greetings, family. We are so excited to have you with us today. We have an incredible treat for you. Thank you for joining us for Up Close with Dr. Berry. Today we have a special guest, none other than Jesse Tyson. So Jesse, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you with us on today. Obviously, for those who have been following your career, you are known in both national and international circles, and people see your today. But what was life like growing up?
My life growing up was a story that most people today probably can't relate to. Sure. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother was 10th grade educated. My grandfather had no formal education. And we grew up as cotton sharecroppers. So we basically lived on a white guy's farm, sure. Didn't get paid, but in exchange for our house, we were required to harvest the crops.
Well, would you have ever guessed as a child that the Lord would open up doors for you not to literally travel the world, but to manage in a major corporation, Exxon Mobil, and to be one of the leaders in the industry? Would you have ever imagined that growing up?
I would never have imagined I would have gotten to some of the places I actually did, although I did feel that I was called early on to get out of where I was. Sure. But clearly, the blessing was much bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Wow, that's amazing. So if you could maybe replay an event or an episode that happened in your childhood that was transformative.
As a 12-year-old, as a sharecropper, our requirements were to work the fields from sunup on Monday to noontime Saturday. We would go into town on Saturday afternoon and do what you did back then, which was basically go to the picture show, sure. Which now we call it a movie. Right. And then you get up Sunday morning, you go to Sunday school, 11 o'clock service, afternoon service, BTU, and night service on Sunday, and the routine started all over again on Monday. This one Saturday, the farm we lived on, the guy came out and said we had to work all day that Saturday because we were behind. And I was 12 years old. There were 5 children at home, and my uncle, who was the oldest at 18, said, "I'm not going to work because I give you 5.5, I get a half, God gets a whole." Wow. And now you want to take that was due to me. So my uncle refused to work, and the farm owner said, "Well, if you don't work, you have to move off the farm." And my uncle said, "So be it." And then I said, "Well, if he doesn't work, I'm not going to work either." Oh, wow. And so we ended up going home. That was a Saturday. That Monday, we had moved. We had been evicted. And so that was a negative experience. But I think as a part of that process, my grandmother said, "It will never happen again because I am going to get a job, and so we'll own our own home. And all of my children who were left at home, there were 5 of us at that time, are going to go off to college." Wow. And her dream came true. She bought a home, and all 5 of us ended up going to college.
Wow. I was reading the other day where you were negotiating $10 billion deals. And just to look at where you started and to where the Lord took you from is simply amazing. How did you know that that's where you needed to be?
When I went to college, I had a professor from Pakistan who tried to convince me to apply for an internship with the U.S. State Department, which I refused. And I remember saying to him, "That's for city boys, and I'm a country boy." Okay. And things like that don't happen for country boys. So I wouldn't apply. Sure. After hounding me for a few weeks, he called me into his office and put a pen in my hand and said, "I've already filled out the application for you. All you have to do is sign your name." Wow. And to get him off my case, I signed my name. And the only time I knew I was actually accepted when the FBI knocked on the door and told me they were doing a background check. Wow. And I ended up spending 3 months at the State Department and 5 months in West Africa in Dakar, Senegal. And that whole experience kind of changed my outlook on what the possibilities were. And so I returned back to the U.S., went to Ohio State to get an MBA. Sure. And then I started work for Exxon, now Exxon Mobil. And I retired in 2011 after 35 years with them. And the second half of my career was all international. Sure. I ran the Latin America business for Exxon. So I ended up negotiating with heads of state and spent most of my time outside of the U.S. when I was running the Latin America business. And I ended my career in Brussels, Belgium as the global aviation director, then returned back to the U.S. in 2011 and retired.
What would you encourage every young person as it relates to international travel?
Well, I would say to anybody nowadays, if you really want to have a great corporate career, sure. International experience is just a must. Because when you look at what technology has done in the corporate space, You don't just compete domestically. You compete with people all around the world. And having an understanding of those cultures and being comfortable in that environment gives you a leg up. Whereas if you don't have that experience, you're always a little uncertain about whether or not you really are good enough.
That's amazing. Well, as we look at your career, you obviously, after 35 years of service, could have easily decided to just ride off into the sunset. But obviously, you feel a deep sense of giving back. Currently, you serve as the CEO and executive director for the Black MBA Association. Where does your philanthropic and sense of responsibility to give back come from?
Well, it all starts with my grandmother, and she instilled in me the fact that there were three phases of my life that I had to fulfill. One was the learning phase, the second phase was the earning phase, and the third phase was the returning phase. And so I'm kind of in the return phase now, and I feel good about it. I mean, I feel as good about that as I did in the earning phase. And basically, I know as a little boy growing up in the rural South, there are other boys and girls out there who look like me who are in the same predicament. And if somebody doesn't reach out and give them a helping hand, the likelihood is they won't fulfill their dreams. And so I try to do what I can do now to help someone fulfill their dreams. And with the National Black MBAs, we have a program called LOT, Leaders of Tomorrow, where we reach into high school and teach young black boys and girls how to respect themselves, how to respect others, and how to prepare for the next phase of life, and how not to make a mistake now that's going to have lifelong implications. And we try to make sure they understand no is a complete sentence. And so when people are trying to get you to do something that you know is wrong, the answer is no. And you have to have the courage to say that and then walk away. But we feel good about what we're doing. We're trying to provide scholarship monies for those who would like to go on to college but may not have the opportunity to do because of finances. And the event yesterday, we had 25 teams competing, studying a Harvard business case. And these are high school students studying a Harvard business case. And the top three teams will split $30,000 in scholarship money.
What would you say to the executive or young professional who's watching the broadcast and they're trying to still maintain a sense of faith and relationship with God, as well as balance corporate life? How are you able to keep those two in balance?
Well, you don't have a choice, really. It's just for me, it was just part of my DNA. And I had the fortune of marrying a Christian woman who you know, my wife Cheryl. And she helps to keep me grounded. Sometimes we get a little altitude in our attitudes, and she has a pen that she will stick in that and kind of deflate it a little bit, and it's needed. We haven't been saved forever, and even being a Christian, we still sometimes will do some things that are not Christ-like. But just having that faith, having a wife next to you who keeps you grounded, and just remembering that person who brought you up and taught you some things, and sometimes just remembering even when I'm doing some things, and my grandmother passed away a few years ago, even though I know she's physically not here, I'm always looking around to see if she might see some of the things that I'm doing. But it's just the upbringing really just is what keeps me going and keeps me grounded.
Ladies and gentlemen, I pray that something was shared today that was beneficial for your life. The wisdom and the experiences of Jesse Tyson, I believe, are timeless, and we want to thank you again for sharing with us with Up Close with Dr. Berry.